Welcome to the Finding the Magic podcast, where books come alive. I'm Tricia Copeland, a fiction author and host of this show. If you love books, finding great reads, and hearing about the story behind the story directly from the authors, this is the place for you. Whether you like fantasy, science fiction, dystopian, or romance titles, I think you'll find something to love in my playlist. Listen in to discover something magical about a book or two today.
Welcome, Jeff.
Hi, Tricia. How you doing?
I'm good. Today we have Jeffery H. Haskell, USA Today bestselling military sci-fi author, and I'm super excited to talk about your Grimm's War series and wherever else we go with this conversation. Do you want to just jump in and tell me about the series?
Absolutely. Grimm's War is a military sci-fi series, sort of a classic military sci-fi, set about 1,000 years in the future, and it follows the adventures, so to speak, of a naval commander who is, in the beginning, disgraced, and then through the course of the series, manages to recoup his reputation as the books go on. And it is something I spent a long time thinking about, pretty much since I was I got out of the Army in 95, and I probably started jotting notes down here and there, throughout the next 15, 20 years of how I would write a military sci-fi series if I ever got to. And when I did finally eventually start writing it, I took all those notes that I had come up with over the years and threw most of them away and kept the ones that worked. And then Grimm's War is what I got.
Wow, that's amazing. Were you a big reader of the genre before you started writing in that genre?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I've been reading. I grew up on a small island in Alaska, and so I spent most of my days either in the library reading or at home reading. I actually got kicked out of English class once for reading because I had finished the book that they had assigned, and I'd moved on to Hunt for Red October. Oh. And the teacher did not think that that was appropriate use of the time. But reading has always been an escape for me. I love reading, and so the thing about military sci-fi is there's not a ton, at least there wasn't a ton growing up. And so I read all of them, all the Robert Heinlein stuff and David Weber's stuff and everything in between, Ben Bova. And so when I got to a place in my life where I was like, I've always wanted to be a writer, maybe now's the time to do it. I looked around and couldn't find anything that I wanted to read anymore. And part of that was because most of the people writing military sci-fi in the late, in the teens, were all global war on terror veterans. And so they were writing about what they knew, which was infantry stuff. And while I was in the Army, I always loved spaceships and, big epic battles in space like Star Trek and Battlestar Galactica and things like that. And so, and David Weber's books, the Honorverse books, were a huge inspiration to me. And I wanted to write something that was, a tenth as good as he is, because he's the master. He's the giant in my genre. And so I started writing against all odds. And the publisher, Athon Books, who is amazing, really loved the idea. And they greenlit the first 3 books for me in 2022. And the first one, or in 2019, and the first one came out in 2022. And was nominated as a finalist for the Dragon Award, which is really ironic because I was beaten by David Weber and Timothy Zahn at the Dragon Award, which I'm totally okay with.
I was going to say, to even be on that list would be very much an honor.
I never understood when people said that, like, being nominated is an honor. I'm like, winning is an honor, being nominated, whatever. But then, yeah, to be said in the same breath with someone you really, really admire, who is salt of the earth, nicest guy in the world, who actually called me after he beat me because he wasn't there to tell me that my book was great and it deserved to be there. I just, it doesn't get better than that. I want to be that man, I want to be that good.
And so are these hard sci-fi novels? Do you really get into the technical aspects of the ships? And is it different technology than we have now? How does that look?
That's actually a really great question. And of all the interviews I've done, people don't usually ask me that. So thank you for asking me that. I would call it hard-ish sci-fi. whenever you're talking about space travel, there are some things you just have to accept that we don't know if it's ever going to be possible. I didn't want to write a series that took place like The Expanse wholly within, the solar system, right? I wanted far reaches and far stars, and I wanted some exploration, because part of why I loved Star Trek was all the exploration, the new planets and strange new worlds and stuff like that. So there is FTL. It's as close to hard sci-fi as I can get, and still allow for the traditional definition of hard sci-fi being, if it isn't possible now, it's fake, right?
Right.
But everything I do, from the FTL to the way their ships work, is all based on a lot of research that has been done by NASA and JPL and real scientific facts. I have a physics advisor who helps me on some stuff, and because I've always had this philosophy that if you can get like the really big science things right, then you can fudge on some of the little stuff. And if you get all the little real world stuff right, you can fudge on some of the big stuff. And, I just ask that people be like, if you love hard sci-fi, you're going to like the book series. You're just going to have to accept that there is FTL, and, go from there. But yeah, I do get kind of technical on the ships and the science. I wait, though, until I feel like the reader wants that information. So like the first 75% of the first book really just kind of brushes over any scientific stuff and all the little, details and things that you'd be interested in if you had already read the book.
Okay.
So I'm a character story first kind of writer. I really believe that characters are what drive stories. And no matter what the story is about or where it's set, people will always come back for the character. And so that's kind of where I write first. And then as you get into it, if you're still there with book 2, you're gonna get some more science. If you're still there with book 3, you're gonna get some more science. And it's all really interesting scientific principles that we know exist but can't quite figure out exactly how they work and stuff like that. And I try to introduce some really unusual stellar phenomenon that we maybe haven't seen in fiction before, which obviously requires a lot of research, because we have a lot of fiction about space. And it's all rather, it's really cool to write about stuff that is sort of on the fringe of what we know without making anything up, and so it is a lot of fun, but it can get a little bit heavy. So part of my editor's job is to be like, hey, I really like this story. You need to lose these 800 words here about how, dark nebulas work, because that's just not important, Yeah, okay.
Well, I always ask that question of sci-fi authors because we have this split in my house. So my husband is like, he wants to read the hard sci-fi he's an engineer. So he wants to read the hard sci with all the technical stuff. Like we read The Martian and he's going to read the whole thing with all the hard sci-fi. And I get to those paragraphs and I'm like, okay, skim. I don't really care how you got from one place to the other. It's just fine that you did for me.
And that's good. And, and that's really totally legitimate. And that's actually the schism in the science fiction readership community, right? Is that I want, it's fine. They jump in the ship and they go to light speed. That's fine. And then there's yeah, but how? And I was the kid growing up where I had all the Star Trek technical manuals. I had Scott's Guide to the Enterprise and all those little, I love looking at the ships and the maps and how does the warp drive work? And I would do like calculations for the speed of light and stuff like that. Now, as a caveat, I'm not a scientist. I'm just an avid reader. And so I know a lot about science and I know a lot of trivia about science. I can't like talk at length about anything, but I really, when I do put science in the books, I do very careful research to make sure that it's as accurate, as close to as I can get it as possible. So if your husband likes that sort of thing, he'll probably like the books.
Right. Yeah. So, and sometimes he'll read books that I give him. He's like, no, this is fantasy. Take this away from me.
If he had a problem with the storm on The Martian because of the wind speed being unrealistic, and he couldn't finish the book because of it, then he won't like my book. But if he was okay with it, then he'll like my book.
No, he finished the book and he read the second one. So yeah, he'll like your book. Okay, so talk to me about the characters then. So we have this naval officer has been disgraced. Do we know what happened or?
Yes. So one thing else I also like to do is I like to base everything I write on stuff that's happened in history, because Like the strangest, most crazy things you'll ever imagine aren't better than stuff that's already happened in history. And so we have this naval officer. His name is Jacob T. Grimm, and he is on watch. He's a junior officer on a light cruiser, and they're attacked. And he does everything by the book, absolutely right, responds exactly the way he's supposed to. It just turned out that he was a setup, and the ships, when they went and investigated the ships that attacked them, there was a plant that made him look really bad. Like, oh, you attacked these innocent people, you evil person. And instead of resigning, he took really crap posts and went and just put his head down and did the work and stayed in the Navy, while everybody else who was involved resigned. And the press just persecuted him, and they persecuted the Navy. And eventually, he's hoping that they'll forget about him and they'll let him be back on a ship again. But he's also getting older, and in the military, you can only stay in the military at a certain rank at a certain age for so long. So you can't be a 50-year-old lieutenant. It's you have so many years to be promoted, or you're kicked out. And he's approaching that time. If he doesn't get promoted, he's going to be kicked out. And the problem is, his mother had served in the Navy as well. She had died in the previous war as a hero. And now all he's concerned about is that whenever anybody sees his family's legacy, all they're going to see is this thing that he did. And they call him the Butcher of Haskell. And because that's the system he was in when it happened. And everybody's going to forget his mother's sacrifice. And his dad won't speak to him, and his family has ostracized him. So he's just desperate for one more chance to redeem his family's name. And then they need the Office of Naval Intelligence. It's like, oh, hey, there's this thing happening over here, and we really could use somebody we could disavow and kind of throw away. And he doesn't need to know that, though. We're just going to assign him to this destroyer that's out here on the rim that doesn't have a captain, the engine doesn't work. And we'll just see what happens when he starts, doing his job out there. And if everything goes south, great, because we can pin it on him and use that as an excuse to move in the Navy and deal with all these pirates and smugglers. It just, nobody told him. So he goes out there and he does his job the way he's supposed to do it. And he puts the ship back together and he inspires his crew. And, he ends up busting all this stuff wide open and, really advantageously benefiting the Navy.
That's cool. So is it a third person point of view? So
Yes.
that he's being put there, but he doesn't know he's being put there, and you can kind of see that in the background.
That's such a great, concise description of the use of third person, because it's exactly what third person is for. It's so great at that. It's like, hey, let me do this point of view of this guy who's setting this person up, and now you get to be in the point of view of this person.
Right, and you just have to wait to see if he's gonna be able to, achieve what he wants to achieve, or if he's gonna be the fall guy again, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And yeah, it is third person. It's about 124,000 words. Like I said, I grew up reading classic science fiction, so both third person and first person. And I really wanted to write something that I would kind of call it epic military sci-fi. There's action, there's adventure, there's romance, all the stuff the Princess Bride says there should be. But it's, at the end of the day, it's a story about this man and his principles and how he takes a stand and will not back down and won't quit, no matter the odds. So, and it's a relatable story. You could put that story anywhere and it would be great. And it just so happens that for me, I love far future sci-fi, and I love destroyers and spaceships and all that stuff. And the spaceship is a huge part of the book. It's called the USS Interceptor, and it's a small destroyer. It's got a shark nose. It's got a shark painted on the nose, kind of like the World War II Flying Tiger planes or the Warthog. And it's very much a character in the books.
Oh, neat. Yeah, I grew up watching Star Wars movies and love those movies. So it's very much that feel where they refer to the ship as they're another character in the book as well.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Falcon, right? I mean, the
Right.
Falcon's a classic one. The Enterprise was a huge one for me. The Galactica, if you're I grew up in the 80s, so I graduated from high school in 91. So for me, there was like in the 80s, there was the space battleship Yamato and the Robotech SDF-1, all these ships that were hugely influential to me as a kid. And not to mention the fact that I grew up, I was born in 73. So I was only like 1.5 generations removed from World War II. So I knew guys who served on the original Enterprise, in World War II. And, the Starship Enterprise from Star Trek, which was named after the Enterprise in World War II, was hugely influential to me. So it's ships are important to me. I didn't want to have a throwaway ship of the week kind of thing. It's the Interceptor. He stays on the Interceptor for a long time in the book series, and you really get to know it and the crew.
And yeah, that's the next thing I was going to say. Who are the supporting characters? Do we meet? Is there other like aliens or life forms, or how does that work?
Well, your husband will be relieved to know that there are no aliens.
Okay.
So maintaining my hard sci-fi. The funny thing is I get asked the aliens question a lot, and I don't do it because I have no interest in xenobiology. Biology is not my scientific area of interest. I love physics and I love engineering and, radiation and things like that. So to come up with like a realistic alien that wasn't just like a Star Trek alien with a thing on their forehead, I don't think I could do that and be believable enough to me that I'd want to write about it. Larry Niven and Jerry Pournelli did a fantastic job in a book called The Mote in God's Eye with these aliens that they found. And I'm not them. They're legends. I'm not.
Well, everybody has their thing, has their specialty, right? And if that's not what you're passionate about, don't write what you know and write what you love, right? You have to kind of enjoy it as you do it.
And, I've got a buddy, Rick Partlow, who writes a series called Drop Trooper, and he has these fantastic aliens in it called the Tawny. And for me, the realm of human conflict is broad enough that there isn't a reason for me to bring in an alien species in this. There's plenty of human psychology at play where, you've got people in this universe who are, a lot like we have today. You have different empires that are, some of them are fascists and some of them are socialists and some of them are freedom loving and some of them are religious zealots. And we have all that today. We've had all that for the last 2,000 years and the 2,000 years before that. There's no reason for me to think that we're not going to have that in 1,000 years. People don't change. A person can change, people don't.
Right.
And so there's plenty of conflict just having people exist in the universe. And so I do have a supporting cast. The ship has about 100 people on it. I have 6 or 7 reoccurring characters from the ship itself. A couple of like the Admiral of the Navy and the Admiral who runs the Office of Naval Intelligence is reoccurring. And of course, what you might say the second main character, though Jacob is absolutely 100% the main character, is Nadia Dagger, and that's his love interest.
Oh.
And she is a Office of Naval Intelligence foreign affairs agent or spy, and retired when he meets her, but she gets back in the game after stuff happens in the first book. And she's really fun to write. She is a sarcastic, witty, awesome spy, very clever spy. And there's a subplot in almost every book with her doing spy stuff, uncovering, foreign spy rings, investigating corruption. In one book, she infiltrates an enemy base, disguised as an old lady who's a genetically altered to look old, and she is like a cleaning lady in the base, and they have no idea that she's a spy, and she's there the whole time collecting all this information. It's just all kinds of really kind of fun ground adventures with her that bring more dimension to the story of whatever Jacob is doing on the ship, because a ship is a ship. You're there. He can't really know anything that's happening outside in the broader universe. There's no faster than light communications.
Oh, okay.
So I use different characters to sort of like illustrate things that are happening in the universe that maybe he's not privy to or affecting them at that moment.
Interesting. Yeah, because you would have to pull in like the political landscape and, the drama of this group versus that group and all of
Yeah,
those.
absolutely. And it's military sci-fi. And so a certain level of politics is expected. and I enjoy writing it. You can't tell a story about the military and not have at least a small amount of politics based, because they're the ones who make the decisions that control the military. So, the military is the enforcement arm of the diplomats. And so when your government says we want peace at all costs, that's going to be reflected, with how the military operates. And in the beginning of these books, unfortunately, they had a war that they didn't quite lose the war, but in a way, it's a lot like World War One, where everybody just sort of decided to stop fighting, and then everybody blamed Germany. And then for this one, it was everybody decided to stop fighting, and the side that got blamed was the side the Jacob's people were on, but they weren't really involved all that much. And politicians use that to kind of lambast the Navy and get themselves really powerful. So part of the story of the whole series is the Navy coming back and rebuilding and getting their honor back and finding their roots again.
Right. So not only does that one character get his honor back, but his whole organization.
Yes. Yeah.
So Against All Odds is the first book, and there are 8 books in the series.
Yes.
The last of which is Grimm's Legacy. Is that the last book in the series, or is there more to come in this series?
No, I'm actually working on one called The Longest Battle, which will be book 9.
Okay.
And my publisher, which is Athon Vault Books, or maybe it's just Athon Vault. It was Athon Books, but they rebranded recently. It's Red C. Bruno and Steve Ballier. They're absolutely amazing publisher. I could not ask for a better publisher. Book 8 came out and they're like, hey, it's really doing great. Do you want to do 3 more after 9? So I just signed a contract to do 10, 11, and 12. And, hopefully I can come up with a story for those.
Fine. Yeah. So it's hard. So when I write series, I always know like the beginning and the end. And I don't know exactly how many books are going to be in there, but I always need in my mind some ending. And maybe that's just because I need a goal to get me there. But do you just come up with new ideas for new challenges and adventures for these characters? Or do you have individual themes for books depending on how you're feeling, what you're thinking, what you're focusing on?
You sound way more organized than I am. I wish I was. I do know how the series is going to end, but that ending is independent of anything that happens between now and then, right? So my approach to writing a book is what do books do better than any other medium? They do it better than movies. They do better than TV shows. They do better than songs. They make you feel things over a long period of time. Right. So a song might make you feel something when you listen to it. A movie might make you feel something when you watch it. But generally speaking, unless you're some of the speed readers that apparently read my books and finish them 4 hours after they come out, you're with a book for 15 hours. And I want to make you feel something that whole time. And so when I'm writing a book, I'm like, what do I want them to feel when they come away from this book? And what kind of theme do I want them to take away? Do I want the reader to take away and think, wow, I've come away with this book feeling like I'm a better person for having read it? Because despite the name being grim, I do not get into grimdark. I want to write about people who are good people, it's not like they don't make mistakes, but they're always trying to do the right thing. And, Jacob messes up a lot. People on his crew mess up a lot. But it's not they don't wallow in their failures or their mistakes or being bad or whatever. They're always trying to do the next right thing. And so starting from there, every book has a theme. Some of it's brotherhood, some of it's sacrifice, and there's usually like a clue in the title what the book is going to be about.
Yeah, because when you see the title Grimm's Legacy, I was like, I wonder if that's the last one, but I guess not.
It could have been. Every book there is an overall story, but every book is its own story.
Right.
When you read one of these books, you read it beginning, middle, end, it's done. I do have hooks throughout every book for the next book and for the series as a whole, but the story of the book is finished at the end of the book. I personally love cliffhangers. And I have no problem with them whatsoever, especially when they're done well. If you've ever read John Carter of Mars, oh gosh, Burroughs. Can't think of the author's name. can't believe that. Oh, great. He was the master of cliffhangers. He would set you up with a cliffhanger that would just be like, I can't believe he just did that. I have to turn the page and find out.
Yeah.
Readers, generally speaking, react poorly to cliffhangers. So I try to wrap every story up at the end of the book, but with like an after, an epilogue, that, you know, hints of stuff to come.
Fun. Yeah, so you do kind of have to have the next idea while you're writing the current book.
Hopefully. Not always. I've had a couple of times where I have dropped some hooks at the end of the book, started writing the next book and been like, oh no, none of this works. So now I have to figure out a way to rework those hooks so they mean something else in retrospect.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, every once in a while I want to have a plot line and I think I'm gonna have to break the rules in my fantasy world, and then I'm like, oh, we gotta find a way around this. So I get how that goes.
You know, it's funny is that to me it's like the place, the rule, where the rules are and how you can stay in those rules but still make the story work is where the story happens, right? The difference there is where the magic happens, so to speak. And setting yourself up with hard limits of what you can do, because once I explain the FTL system in the books, that's how it works. And the thing is the ships have to come to a complete stop in order to use their faster than light drives. And they're not really drives. I don't want to, it's complicated, but because they have to come to a complete stop, that means you can't just go in battle and be like, oh, I'm going to, hop around here and use my faster than light drive to move around in battle. And when you're at a complete stop in space, you're a sitting duck. And so there's lots of situations where I'm like, well, they could just go to the star lane and get out, but they can't because there's a ship too close. And that, that adds tension. And that's really where the story exists, is in those places where I have set up rules, I cannot break them. And now I have to find a way for them to succeed, even though the rules say they can't.
Yeah, that's the fun part for me, because that's really where your creative brain has to really figure things out. And I like that you call it magic, because you found the magic.
There's magic, and then there's the magic.
No, the magic. That's what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
But my brain is going to the fact that, and I'm going to get a little geeky here.
Sure.
In space, can you ever really stop in space? Because if you're like you're going to keep going because there's nothing to stop you. Like there's no atmosphere to stop you, right? Unless you're like, I guess if you're on a planet, that planet is still moving, but you would be stopping in relation to the planet, right?
Well, let's blow your mind a little further. The planet's moving. The sun that it's rotating around is moving. The galaxy is spinning. Can you ever truly stop in space? No. But relative motion and relative distance and relative speed in space are basically everything.
Okay.
So it's always relative to what's around you, right? So the FTL travel works in the way that two stars are connected via gravity in space, and there's a space-time, which is the layer of underneath our dimension that is where gravity exists, right? And so stars are connected by lines. I call them star lanes. That's how they move faster than light. They have to find that point in space where these two suns are connected and access it. So they have to stop relative to the system primary. Okay. So that's very accurate. You're a very good point, you guys are. Tell your husband.
I have enough sci-fi brain up there that I can sometimes pull things out.
It's funny is because I get a lot of I've had like physics teachers, and I had somebody from JPL send me an email once. I had someone from DARPA send me an email, and they're like, hey, I noticed you did this thing here. Are you sure about this, this, and this? I'm like, I am not sure about that because I am not a scientist. But here's the paper I took it from NASA. Enjoy,
Well, and you can always say, well, if you want to help me, please do. Right?
And they do, yeah. No, it's the great thing about the science in the books is I attract scientific minds, and they're like, oh, if you have any questions. I met a wonderful lady who worked for DARPA, who was a chemical engineer, something like that. And I had questions about osmium, and she just sent me like 9 pages on osmium and how it's found and how you mine it, because it was relative to a plot in the book I was writing at the time. And it was awesome. It absolutely made the book super authentic, and I absolutely loved it. So it's just, she was amazing.
That's very cool. Yeah, my background is biotech, so I would be the one creating all the weird aliens if I was writing sci-fi. But that's for a
It's never too late to write sci-fi.
No, it's not. I wrote sort of sci-fi light, but it was based on biotech stuff. So
it's funny is my wife is very much the fantasy person. Like, I grew up reading Dungeons and Dragons books, and I grew up reading all the traditional fantasy novels. I love fantasy too. I mean, like, I'm not like against fantasy, epic fantasy or sword and sorcery. I've read Conan, but I mean, in my heart, I'm a sci-fi person. And my wife's like, in her heart, she loves Star Wars, but in her heart, she's epic fantasy. And so it's funny that you guys have that same sort of relationship.
Fun. Okay, so I hear you have a big announcement about Against All Odds and the Grimm's series going into some very cool bookstores.
Yes, absolutely. So I started off my career as the indie author. I wrote a couple of really cool superhero series to kind of like cut my teeth and get better, because I didn't want to go into the genre I loved, which is military sci-fi, as a new writer. I wanted to have some experience. I wanted to be able to say, hey, I had written a few things, and you don't know what you don't know. And the only way you know is by writing a book. And so when I finally did go into military sci-fi, I did get published with Aethon Books, but Aethon Books is not a traditional publisher. They are a e-publisher. They publish mostly through Kindle Unlimited and Amazon.com. And while there are paperbacks, it's all through Amazon. The vast majority of our sales go through ebooks and Kindle Unlimited, and audiobooks through Audible. And I have a wonderful narrator. So if you like audiobooks, they're absolutely good. Yeah. Peter Burkrot is the narrator. He fabulous job. I listen to my own books, which I know is rare for authors, but I have listened to my own books like 10 times each.
No, I do the same thing, because when I'm writing the next book, I listen to the one before to make sure I remember all the different pieces, and I love listening to them. It's like they come alive.
Yeah, and it's you forget that you wrote it.
Yeah.
And because if you have to reread something you wrote, your eyes glaze over, and you miss details because you wrote it, but listening to somebody else say it, yeah, it's fantastic. And so that's pretty much the path for an indie guy is you get picked up by a mid-level publisher, and they promote your book, and you get a lot of sales, and maybe you get a few awards, and that's kind of where it ends. But Aethon Books did something truly amazing. Is they're so successful, they bought Vault Comics. And Vault Comics is a traditional publisher. They have a deal with Simon & Schuster. And Simon & Schuster wanted to put military sci-fi back in Barnes & Nobles. And so they went to Vault and Aethon, and they said, what do you got for military sci-fi? And they said, hey, we've got these two great authors, Jeffery H. Haskell and Rick Partlow. They've sold hundreds of thousands of books. How about them? So Simon & Schuster said yes. And starting October 21st, Against All Odds, Grimm's War Book 1, and Contact Front, Drop Trooper Book 1 are going to be in Barnes & Noble nationwide.
Well, congratulations. That's so exciting. I'm so excited for you.
So beyond belief. I never imagined being in a bookstore, let alone with like an amazing powerhouse like Simon & Schuster behind it. For me, the book, I had the best I could hope for. Lots of readers. I get to make a living writing books, that people like, and I get to support my family with it. And now it's, oh, hey, now you also you get to do something that very few indie authors do. You get to go from being an indie author to being traditionally published in bookstores.
That is very cool. Well, congratulations many times over. Well, obviously on October 21st, 2025, we can find your book in Barnes & Noble, Against All Odds, of Grimm's. I'm going to mess it up. Grimm's.
That's all right. Grimm's War.
Grimm's War series. Thank you. Yes, I love your covers too.
Okay, so I have to tell you real quick about the cover. So you see the shark on the ship?
Mm-hmm.
So this cover is done by vividcovers.com, which, full disclosure, is my wife.
Nice.
And we put a lot of work into this cover. She painted this. She's an absolutely amazing artist.
Wow. So
if you like really cool spaceship art and other sci-fi type art, vividcovers.com is the way to go.
Thank you.
And if you like the cover of this book, you will like the book. It's just how it's set up. I've never met anybody who loved the cover and said, oh, that book sucked. They
Well,
all,
I think, yeah, you're attracted to what you love, so that works.
absolutely. If you can't wait till October 21st and you want to read an ebook, you can read the ebook version on Amazon through Kindle and Kindle Unlimited. You can download the audiobook from audible.com. If you're at all wanting to see military sci-fi, come back into Barnes & Noble because it hasn't been there in a while. Pre-order the book at a Barnes & Noble's, and you will get, the better we do, the more likely it is that Simon Schuster will say, hey, you know what? People want military sci-fi again. Let's put it back in the stores.
Fun. And tell us your website so we can find you there.
JefferyHaskell.com. It's pretty basic. Mostly I go off of, you can find me on Twitter, Jeffery Haskell, or Facebook, Jeffery Haskell. And, I'm very open to talking to people. I love talking about sci-fi and books. You can email me at, wait for it, jeffrey.haskell@gmail.com. And I'm happy to chat with anybody who wants to talk. I love talking, so that helps.
That helps when you're here too. So thank you so much. And I hope you will come back next time you release your next book.
Oh, absolutely. I'd love to. I'd absolutely love to.
Sounds good. Have a good night, Jeff.
Thanks, Trish.
Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Finding the Magic podcast. I'm your host, author and podcaster Tricia Copeland, and I love getting behind the scenes. If you like the podcast, make sure to subscribe and stop in each week to discover new authors and books. Thanks for listening, and until next time, keep finding the magic.